Viridian, The Green Guide, written by Clouds, read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 115, Mortality. Shota was an idiot. In my experience, it's not nearly as bad as people make it out to be. It was like everything suddenly clicked into place. All those times that Viridian had said he couldn't be a hero, his weird insistence that he wasn't actually a vigilante, Kachan bursting out laughing after Shota suggested a quirk. All of it made sense. No wonder no one could figure out what Viridian's quirk was. He didn't have one. Wait, Viridian didn't have a quirk. He'd been doing everything quirkless. He'd been fighting people dosed on trigger and modified to have multiple powerful quirks. He was outmatched on a daily basis. That was so dangerous. And he didn't have any way to defend himself. And what was Shota even thinking? He knew that Viridian was capable of defending himself and defeating strong opponents. He'd seen the kid fight villains 3 times his size and win. So why had Shota forgotten all of that and started panicking as soon as the kid said he was quirkless? No wonder the kid had never told anyone. Viridian had probably been met with 2 responses when people learned about his quirk status: hatred or pity. Growing up like that, with people rejecting him left and right just for the way he was born, it was a wonder he was as well adjusted as he was, honestly. That was if becoming a teenage vigilante counted as being well adjusted. It probably didn't, but at least they'd been able to give him a little bit of support, which the kid was most likely and justifiably terrified of losing now that Shota knew about his quirk status. His plan of enrolling Viridian in the Vigilante Rehabilitation Program had just flown right out the window, because there was no way that the Hero Commission wouldn't exploit every possible loophole to keep him out of the program. But maybe if they could find a way to loophole him back into it. Shota was so busy reeling at the revelation that he almost missed the way that Viridian's eyes were darting around the room, searching for something. Shota managed to pull himself out of his thoughts just as the kid found what he was looking for, and he discreetly followed the kid's gaze for just long enough to see the camera before pretending he hadn't seen it at all. All for One was watching. Viridian cleared his throat, calling Shota's attention back to him, and there was a calculating look in his eye as he started talking again, this time loud enough for the cameras to hear. I think that All for One will steal my quirk first. Shota had no idea what the kid was planning, considering that he'd just all but confirmed that he didn't have a quirk to steal, but he'd play along. Interesting theory, especially since he's been after mine longer, at least considering the incident that led to Shirakumo's abduction. Viridian shot him half a grateful look before continuing, yeah, but my, quirk will be more useful to him. Shota narrowed his eyes. How so? Well, think about it. The problem child sounded more certain now. I can pick apart any quirk within seconds and almost instantly identify any weaknesses, not to mention find new uses and figure out how they might fit together. That's how we figured out that Kurogiri was Shirakumo. I was able to pick apart the quirk and figure out what quirks went into it. An ability like that would be more useful than a simple canceling ability, considering that his collection of quirks can already easily overpower any single quirk user. Was the kid baiting All for One? Of all the stupid, brilliant ideas that Viridian had come up with, this had to be simultaneously one of the dumbest and smartest of them all. On the one hand, if it worked and All for One went for Viridian's quirk first, there would be a split second when he realized there was nothing to steal. And if they could find a way to untie themselves, there would be an opening that they could use to fight back and maybe even escape. But if they failed and missed that opening, which they would because they were still tied up, Shota was honestly terrified of how All for One would react to the knowledge that Viridian had done so much damage, all without a quirk. They couldn't risk it, especially since Shota was 90% sure Viridian was planning on sacrificing himself to prevent Shota's quirk from being taken. And while he appreciated the thought, it was self-destructive and wouldn't even work. I don't think so, problem child. Shota yanked on his rope slightly to show Viridian why that plan was such a bad idea. I could always erase his quirk to keep him from taking yours, so he'll take mine first. Viridian frowned, and Shota could tell he was thinking hard to figure out how to say what he was thinking. It would be easiest if they could speak openly, but simply whispering among themselves would tip All for One off that they were plotting something. Eventually, Viridian sighed and slumped down in his seat as much as he could with the ropes. The way he was sitting now meant that their arms were rubbing together slightly, and Shota had to fight not to react when he felt something hard beneath the baggy fabric of the hoodie. A pang of hope shot through him, along with a small amount of pride. The kid had hidden an extra weapon in case of emergencies, and All for One had missed it. They had a chance. Only if he doesn't know quirks well, Viridian insisted, wiggling and bracing himself against Shota until whatever he had hidden up his sleeve came loose. When I analyze quirks, especially the transferred ones, it's almost like each quirk has its own flavor almost. And I think that the quirks probably act like what they are. So if he takes a quirk that erases powers, there's a risk that it might erase his ability to take powers, at least until he gets used to it and takes full control of it. Shota didn't smirk as the screwdriver finally dropped into Viridian's hand, but he wanted to. He had no idea if the kid was pulling theories out from thin air, or if All for One losing his abilities to steal quirk was actually a risk. But the important thing was that All for One believed it. He glanced toward the camera and spoke a little lower to seem suspicious, but not low enough that the cameras wouldn't pick him up. The most effective way to bait All for One into doing what they wanted was to make him think they wanted the opposite. So we should try to get him to take my quirk first, because then he won't be able to take yours. Viridian grinned. Exactly. Kid. Shota said seriously, you know we can't afford to pull any punches, right? Viridian's smile fell as they made eye contact, and he swallowed nervously. I know. Shota gave a quick nod and let the kid do his thing. They had set their trap, and now it was just a waiting game. Shota glanced down to see Viridian furiously working the screwdriver through the ropes, loosening them and tearing them a little bit at a time. The kid's wrists were raw, but it was only a few minutes until he managed to get one hand free. He kept his hands together, pretending to be helpless until it was the correct moment to strike. Shota's heart broke a little as he wondered how many times Viridian had had to use that trick in his life just to survive growing up quirkless. People wouldn't ever have believed he was anything more than a weak, helpless child, even though he was so much more. He tried to signal the kid to pass over the screwdriver so that he could free himself as well, but before he could, the door opened, and they both froze as All for One walked in, bringing an almost tangible sense of terror with him. So, Viridian, after all those times your meddling has ruined my symphony, we finally meet. Viridian gulped, and he was trembling enough that he almost fumbled his grip on the screwdriver. Shota had known that if he'd gotten to the point of hiring kidnappers, he had to be angry. But he'd underestimated just how much rage a man called the Symbol of Evil could contain. Their plan was looking more and more desperate by the minute, and logically it was. How could they expect to fight against an immortal, multi-quirk madman armed with nothing but one quirk between them and a screwdriver? They had to somehow make it work, though. because Shota was sure of it now. If All for One got his way, they were going to die. All for One drew himself up to his full height, and Shota blinked as he realized that All Might must have given as good as he'd got. He was blind. That didn't make it any less terrifying when he smiled right at them. I couldn't help but overhear your conversation earlier. You are quite right, Viridian. A powerful analysis quirk such as yours will be quite useful to my endeavors. Knowing that the behavior of quirks mimicked their functions would have enabled me to interweave quirks decades earlier. But you know how the saying goes, you live and you learn. Or I will. Sadly, you're not going to live much longer. But don't worry, I'll gladly relieve you of that quirk so you can die with the knowledge that it is being used to further my goals. Don't touch him! Shota growled, take mine instead. All for One turned. Ah, yes, that was your plan, wasn't it? Encourage me to take your pathetic quirk first, so I would be forced to spare the boy? I must be honest, while I would adore to hear you beg and plead for his life, you'll have to be patient and wait your turn. Don't worry. I'll kill you first. That way Viridian will be able to watch. How does that sound? Like hell. Shota grit his teeth and forced himself not to activate his quirk as All for One reached toward Viridian. The kid had said he was quirkless. All for One wouldn't be able to take anything from him. He'd be fine. Hopefully. Viridian tensed as All for One's hand got closer, and he gripped the screwdriver tight enough that Shota could see his knuckles turning white, only for All for One to stop inches from his face and turn to Eraserhead. What? You're not even going to try to cancel my quirk? You would just wait until I blink, Shota spat, glaring at him as he tensed in preparation. It would be illogical to prolong the inevitable. All for One chuckled. True. Too bad that intelligence won't be enough to save you or your protege. He moved suddenly, grabbing Viridian's face roughly, and everything happened in a blur. The moment All for One realized that there was no quirk to steal, he snatched his hand back like he'd been burned. You! The problem child didn't give him a chance to finish his sentence. The moment All for One reared back, Shota activated his quirk, the only thing he could do while he was still tied up, and Viridian surged forward, using the screwdriver to stab All for One where his eyes had been. The violence should have surprised him, but this was the kid that brutally beat one of his first villains that he ever fought with a soup can. When lives were in danger, they couldn't afford to worry about fighting dirty. They did what was necessary to win. Without his quirks, All for One was frail enough that he couldn't put up much of a fight, and Shota felt a mixture of pride, horror, and grief as Viridian desperately stabbed again and again, but he couldn't afford to look away, not when All for One probably had a mixture of healing quirks at his disposal. If he was still alive when Shota had to blink, that was it. There wouldn't be any mercy, and their deaths were guaranteed to be painful. Shota kept his eyes open as long as possible, straining his quirk as far as it would go, but after about a minute, his eyes started burning. Kid, I'm at my limit. I have to blink. Viridian nodded and brought the screwdriver down one last time before checking what was left of All for One's neck for a pulse. He waited a few more seconds before turning to Shota and giving him a sharp nod. Shota sighed in relief and finally closed his eyes, blinking them rapidly for a few seconds and wishing that the villains hadn't stolen his eye drops as well. When he opened them, Viridian was staring at the body tensely, and Shota joined him. Now that Shota wasn't erasing his quirks, it was the moment of truth. If he was going to be able to revive, now was the time he would do it. He didn't know how long they sat staring at All for One's body, but it was long enough for it to become clear that All for One wasn't going to revive, and long enough for Viridian's brain to catch up to what he just had to do. The kid dropped the screwdriver, staring at the body in horror as he scrambled away. I, he, I. It's okay, problem child. Shota tried to speak calmly and strained against the ropes, trying to reach his kid as Viridian saw his own hands and started freaking out even more. He was going to kill us both. You did what you had to do. I just. Viridian brought his hands to his head, smearing blood through his hair as he spiraled into a panic attack. I didn't. Viridian! Shota shouted firmly, and the kid's head snapped toward him with wide, haunted eyes. Listen to me. It's okay. We're gonna be okay. Okay? Now, untie me. We need to call the heroes. They'll help. The heroes. Viridian glanced back toward the body on the floor. Tears streaked down his face, cutting through the blood and grime, and Shota started panicking as he watched things click together for the kid, and he got to his feet. I need to. Shota tugged at his ropes again. Don't you dare run away right now, problem child. I'm not going to let them arrest you. Please. This is a part of hero work, but you can't go through this alone, kid. Just let us help you. I'm quirkless, Eraserhead. Viridian turned to him and smiled sadly, and Shota's stomach sank. I can't be a hero. Viridian ran for the door, and Shota felt tears running down his own cheeks, even as he instinctively activated his quirk. No! Get back here! Problem child! Viridian hesitated by the doorway, but didn't look back at him. I'll make sure the rest of the building is clear and call the heroes. I'm sorry. He was gone before Shota could blink. End of chapter.